Hey guys, tonight we're going to dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and ease into a journey back to a time when a simple slip on a whetstone, a tumble from a horse, or even a clumsy fall from a ladder could transform your life into an agonizing nightmare. We're talking about broken bones, but not the kind that get quickly mended with a trip to the emergency room and a brightly colored cast. Oh no. We're stepping into an era where the first surgeons, if you could even call them that, faced shattered limbs with a mix of rudimentary tools, ancient beliefs, and a whole lot of sheer, unadulterated bravery or perhaps recklessness. Let's be honest. If you broke a bone back then, you probably wouldn't live to tell the tale, or at least you'd wish you hadn't. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself suddenly, jarringly, transported. The soft hum of your fan fades, replaced by the distant bleating of sheep and the rustle of coarse linen against your skin. You are no longer in your cozy bed, but lying on a rough pallet, a sharp, searing pain radiating from your leg. You've fallen, perhaps from a low wall, and the sickening crunch you heard was undeniably your tibia snapping. The air smells of damp earth, wood smoke, and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet, like blood. This is the ancient world, a time before antiseptics, before anesthesia, before even a basic understanding of anatomy. A broken bone here isn't just an inconvenience. It's a potential death sentence, a gateway to infection, disability, and a life of excruciating pain. You try to move, but a fresh wave of agony makes you gasp, and you realize, with a chilling certainty, that your leg is bent at an unnatural angle. You might observe a fellow survivor of an amputation, their life forever altered. They might hobble on a crude crutch, or perhaps have a wooden peg leg, a common historical fact for those fortunate enough to afford or fashion one. Their movements are awkward, their balance compromised, and their ability to perform manual labor severely limited. The social stigma of disfigurement and disability was immense, often leading to poverty and isolation. This lifelong struggle, often overlooked in romanticized accounts of ancient medicine, paints a truly heartbreaking picture of survival. In this primal landscape, the concept of a surgeon is fluid, often blending with the roles of shaman, priest, or even village elder. There are no gleaming operating theaters, no sterile instruments. Healing is a blend of practical knowledge passed down through generations, superstitious rituals, and a desperate hope for divine intervention. You might hear whispers of ancient Egyptian bone setters, whose surprisingly sophisticated splints, made from linen stiffened with resin, have been found on mummies. This is a common historical fact, a testament to humanity's enduring struggle with injury. But even with such ingenuity, the fundamental challenges remained pain, infection, and the sheer difficulty of coaxing a shattered bone back into alignment. The sheer psychological trauma of amputation was immense. Beyond the physical pain, there was the profound grief for the lost limb, the sense of incompleteness, and the constant phantom pains that would haunt many survivors. You might wake in the night, convinced your missing leg is still there, aching and throbbing, a cruel trick of your mind. The emotional scars would run as deep as the physical ones, a constant reminder of the day you lost a part of yourself. It's a truly humbling thought, the resilience of the human spirit to endure such a profound loss and continue living. Imagine the sheer terror that grips you as a figure approaches your pallet. He is not a man in a crisp white coat, but a weathered individual, perhaps a village elder or a warrior with some experience in battlefield injuries. His hands, though calloused, seem strong, and his eyes hold a grim determination. He carries no fancy equipment, just some rough strips of bark, perhaps a few lengths of sturdy reed, and a length of coarse rope. There's no gentle bedside manner here, no soothing words, just the stark reality of what must be done. You brace yourself, knowing instinctively that what is to come will be far worse than the initial injury. It's like preparing for a dental appointment where the dentist uses a hammer and chisel. You know it's going to hurt. A lot. The tools of amputation were as terrifying as the procedure itself. Beyond the knife and saw, There might be bone forceps to smooth the edges of the severed bone, or needles made of bone or metal to stitch the skin flaps, if that was even attempted. These instruments, often unsterilized and reused, were themselves vectors of disease, turning the act of saving a life into a potential source of further suffering. The glint of a blood-stained saw, the dull gleam of a heated iron, are images that would forever be seared into your mind. The process of setting the bone, or reduction, is a brutal affair. The elder, perhaps with the help of a few strong assistants, will grasp your leg, one hand above the break, one below. You feel the tension building, the muscles in your leg screaming in protest, already spasming around the shattered fragments. Then, with a sudden, agonizing jerk, he pulls, you scream, a raw, primal sound torn from your throat as the bone fragments grind against each other. A sensation so sharp and visceral you feel it deep in your marrow. The goal is to realign the bone, to bring the broken ends as close as possible. But in the absence of x-rays or even a clear understanding of the fracture pattern, it's often a matter of brute force and educated guesswork. It's a bit like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle in the dark, with half the pieces missing and your eyes closed. The slow, painstaking development of more refined amputation techniques, from the use of tourniquets to control bleeding, to the eventual advent of anesthesia and antiseptics, marked a gradual but profound shift. These advancements slowly began to transform amputation from a last, desperate act into a more controlled and often life-saving surgical procedure. But the echoes of those early, horrifying dismemberments linger, a chilling reminder of the raw courage and sheer desperation that defined the earliest attempts to save lives by sacrificing limbs. You can almost feel the phantom ache in your missing leg, a somber testament to the brutal beginnings of surgical intervention. The throbbing pain in your stump seems to subside, replaced by the quiet hum of your fan as you drift deeper into the story. Once the bone is roughly aligned, the next step is immobilization. The elder might fashion a splint from the materials at hand: bark, reeds, or even hardened clay. These are bound tightly around your leg with strips of linen or animal hide. You feel the pressure, the rough edges digging into your skin, but also a faint sense of stability, a small reprieve from the uncontrolled flopping of your broken limb. The splint is meant to hold the bone in place while it heals. But without proper padding or an understanding of circulation, these bindings can often cause more harm than good, leading to pressure sores, nerve damage, or even gangrene. The simple act of holding the bone still becomes a new source of potential complications. As the phantom ache of your missing limb begins to recede into the background, a new, more unsettling presence emerges from the fringes of early medicine, the flamboyant, often deceptive, and ultimately cruel world of bone-setting quackery. You lie there, perhaps recovering from a broken bone, or perhaps simply observing the desperate landscape of ancient healing, and you witness the rise of individuals who, lacking formal training or genuine medical knowledge, preyed on the vulnerability and desperation of the injured. These were the charlatans, the bone setters who promised miraculous fixes with a blend of showmanship, crude manipulation, and often outright fraud. And then there's the ever-present, silent killer infection. In this world, the concept of invisible germs is utterly unknown. The elder's hands, though perhaps washed in river water, are far from sterile. The splint materials are certainly not disinfected. The open wound, if your bone has pierced the skin, is a direct highway for bacteria from the soil, the air, and the very hands that are trying to help you. You might feel a throbbing warmth developing around the injury in the days that follow, a faint redness spreading across your skin. This is the insidious march of infection, a common historical fact that claimed countless lives, even from seemingly minor injuries. Historians still debate whether the sheer prevalence of infection made any attempt at bone setting almost futile in many cases, or if the occasional successful outcome justified the risks. It's a truly grim lottery, where the odds are stacked heavily against you. You might find yourself in a bustling marketplace, the air thick with the shouts of vendors and the murmur of the crowd. Your attention is drawn to a figure on a makeshift stage, perhaps a traveling showman or a local eccentric, loudly proclaiming his ability to fix any broken bone, any dislocated joint, often with a dramatic flourish. He might demonstrate on a willing and perhaps secretly healthy accomplice. performing a seemingly miraculous realignment with a loud crack and a triumphant grin. This was a common historical fact, the public spectacle of quackery, designed to draw in the desperate and the hopeful. It's like watching a street performer promise to make your money disappear. You know it's a trick, but you're still curious to see how they do it. The pain. Oh, the pain. There is no morphine, no fentanyl, no even a simple aspirin. You are fully conscious, every nerve ending screaming in protest. The elder might offer you a draft of poppy juice, a common historical fact for pain relief, but its effects are often mild and fleeting compared to the agony of a shattered bone being manipulated. You clench your teeth, tears streaming down your face, as the world around you blurs into a haze of white-hot torment. The memory of that searing pain will stay with you, a phantom limb of suffering, long after the bone has healed, if it ever does. It's a pain so profound, so all-encompassing, that it makes you question the very nature of existence. Imagine you are a farmer, your arm mangled in a farming accident, the bone visibly twisted and painful. You've heard whispers of the village bone setter, a man known for his strong hands and his unconventional methods. You approach him, desperate for relief, willing to try anything. He might examine your arm with a quick, rough touch, then, with a sudden, unexpected jerk, attempt to pop the bone back into place. You scream, a fresh wave of agony washing over you, but he assures you the pain is a sign that the healing has begun. What you don't realize is that his manipulation might have caused further damage, or simply exacerbated the existing injury, leaving you worse off than before. The immediate, sharp pain might be interpreted as a sign of efficacy rather than harm. The aftermath of a broken bone, even if it healed, was often a life of disability. Without proper alignment, the bone might knit together crookedly, leaving you with a deformed limb, a limp, or a permanent loss of function. You might see others in your village, their limbs twisted, their movements awkward, bearing the lifelong scars of past injuries. A hunter might no longer be able to run. A farmer might struggle to work his fields. A weaver might lose the dexterity in her fingers. A broken bone didn't just mean temporary incapacitation, it meant a fundamental alteration of your place in society, a diminished capacity to contribute, and a life often marked by chronic discomfort. This long-term disability, often overlooked in modern narratives, is an obscure detail that highlights the profound societal impact of such injuries. The insidious nature of bone-setting quackery lay in its exploitation of the lack of medical understanding and the desperate human need for a quick fix. In an era without x-rays, it was impossible to truly know the extent of a fracture, let alone whether a manipulation had successfully realigned the bone. The quacks relied on visible deformities, swelling, and the patient's pain as their only diagnostic tools. And their successes were often either spontaneous healing, which happens with many simple fractures, albeit often with deformity or the placebo effect. You might observe a patient, after a quack's intervention, feeling a temporary sense of relief, a psychological comfort that masks the underlying physical reality of a still misaligned bone. It's a bit like trying to fix a complex engine by simply hitting it with a hammer. It might make a noise, but it's unlikely to solve the problem. Consider the role of superstition and ritual in the healing process. Alongside the practical application of splints, the elder might chant incantations, offer prayers to deities, or perform symbolic gestures over your injured limb. You might be given an amulet to wear, or a poultice made from strange herbs and animal parts, believed to ward off evil spirits or promote healing. While these rituals offered psychological comfort and a sense of hope, they did little to address the underlying physical trauma or the threat of infection. It's like trying to fix a leaky boat with positive affirmations. It might make you feel better, but you're still sinking. Consider the various secret remedies and ancient techniques peddled by these quacks. They might apply strange poultices made from herbs and animal fats, believed to draw out bad humors or promote bone growth. Some might use elaborate traction devices, often more for show than for actual therapeutic benefit, creating an illusion of scientific sophistication. You might be told to drink a foul-tasting concoction, or to wear a special amulet, all part of the mystique designed to inspire belief and extract payment. This blend of pseudoscience and superstition is an obscure detail that highlights the fertile ground, quackery found in an age of limited knowledge. It's like being sold a magic potion that's just colored water. But you're so desperate. You drink it anyway. The tools of these early bone setters were as brutal as the procedures themselves. You might see a crude knife, perhaps made of obsidian or flint, used to cut away clothing or to drain an abscess. There might be a heavy stone or a wooden mallet, used to apply force during reduction, or perhaps a rough saw, kept for the most desperate of measures. Amputation. Remember that word, we'll come back to it. These instruments, often uncleaned and unsterilized, were themselves vectors of disease, turning the act of healing into a potential source of further suffering. The glint of a dulled, blood-stained blade in the flickering firelight is a truly terrifying sight. The academic debate surrounding the actual harm caused by bone-setting quackery is complex. While it's clear that many quacks were ineffective and some actively caused harm through improper manipulation or delaying legitimate care, historians still debate the extent to which they filled a genuine void in medical access, particularly for the poor or those in rural areas. Some argue that, in the absence of trained physicians, these informal bone setters, with their practical if crude experience, might have occasionally provided a better outcome than no intervention at all. Others contend that the risks of permanent disability, chronic pain, and even death from their interventions far outweighed any potential benefits, making them a significant public health menace. It's like arguing whether a broken clock is better than no clock at all when you're trying to tell time. It might be right twice a day, but it's mostly misleading. The lack of understanding of internal bleeding and shock was another critical factor. A severe fracture could cause significant blood loss, leading to shock, a condition often misinterpreted as a sign of the patient's weakness or the severity of the injury itself. You might feel a sudden coldness, a dizziness, your vision tunneling, and your consciousness fading in and out. The elder, unaware of the internal hemorrhage, might simply attribute your fading strength to the will of the gods or the power of the injury. There were no transfusions, no intravenous fluids, no understanding of vital signs beyond a fading pulse. It's like trying to drive a car without knowing what the gas pedal or brake does. You're just hoping for the best. You might observe a child, their arm visibly deformed after a quack's treatment, the bone having healed in a severely misaligned position. A common historical fact. The child would be left with a lifelong disability, a constant reminder of the false hope and the irreversible damage. Their parents, having spent their meager savings on the fraudulent cure, would be left with nothing but regret and a child whose future was now severely limited. This tragic outcome, repeated countless times, underscores the devastating human cost of unregulated medical practice. Even the healing process itself was a mystery. How did bones knit together? What promoted their growth? These were questions without answers. The elder would simply wait, hoping that nature, perhaps aided by their crude interventions, would take its course. The patient would be left to suffer, often for weeks or months, as the bone slowly, painfully attempted to mend. There was no physical therapy, no rehabilitation, no understanding of how to regain strength and mobility. If you survived, you were left to your own devices, often with a permanently compromised limb. It's a testament to the sheer resilience of the human body that anyone survived such ordeals at all. The sheer audacity of some quacks was remarkable. They would travel from town to town, setting up temporary clinics, often disappearing before their cures could be proven ineffective or harmful. They preyed on the trust of the vulnerable, their silver tongues weaving tales of miraculous recoveries. Imagine the desperate queues of people, clutching their injured limbs, their faces etched with pain and hope, all waiting for a chance to be fixed by the charismatic showman. It's a thought that highlights the pervasive desperation for healing in an era of limited options. The very concept of a hospital as a place of healing was largely absent. You would be treated in your own home, or perhaps in a communal dwelling, surrounded by family and neighbors, their well-meaning but often unhelpful interventions adding to the chaos. The lack of dedicated medical facilities meant that there was no centralized knowledge, no consistent standards of care, and no sterile environment. Each bone setting was an isolated, individual struggle, played out against a backdrop of ignorance and desperation. It's a chilling reminder that even the most basic medical infrastructure we take for granted today was once a distant dream. The symptoms of a quack's treatment often included prolonged pain, increased swelling, and the eventual realization that the bone had healed incorrectly, if at all. In some cases, the manipulation itself could cause new fractures, nerve damage, or blood vessel damage, turning a simple break into a catastrophic injury. The patient would be left not only with their original ailment, but also with new complications, their health further compromised. It's a truly cruel irony, where the very act of seeking relief led to more suffering. The academic debate surrounding the success rates of ancient amputations is grim. While archaeological evidence shows some individuals survived amputations, historians still debate whether these were truly successful outcomes, given the high mortality rates and the severe long-term disability. Some argue that, in cases of severe trauma or untreatable infection, amputation offered the only chance of survival, making it a necessary evil. Others contend that the vast majority of amputations in this era resulted in death from shock, blood loss, or infection, and that any survivors were simply incredibly lucky. It's like arguing whether a coin flip is a good strategy when your life is on the line. It's a 50-50 chance, but that's still terrifying. The eventual decline of rampant bone-setting quackery was a slow process, driven by the rise of scientific medicine, the professionalization of surgery, and the gradual implementation of stricter regulations. As medical schools began to train qualified surgeons and public health awareness grew, the public slowly became more discerning, less susceptible to the empty promises of charlatans. But the human desire for a quick, easy cure for complex problems remains, a testament to the enduring power of hope, even when it's misplaced. You can almost hear the faint, echoing shouts of the market square, the promises of miraculous healing now just a distant, hollow whisper. The sense of vulnerability lingers, a chilling reminder of how easily desperation can be exploited. The slow, agonizing nature of bone healing, even when successful, meant prolonged immobility, which brought its own set of complications. Muscle atrophy, joint stiffness, and bed sores were common, turning the recovery process into a new battle against deterioration. You might lie for weeks, your muscles wasting away, your joints stiffening, as the world outside continues without you. The boredom, the isolation, and the constant pain would wear down even the strongest spirit. It's a truly humbling thought, the sheer endurance required just to survive a broken bone in ancient times. As the echoes of quackery's empty promises fade, a new, more tangible presence begins to emerge from the shadows of early surgical practice, the crude, terrifying instruments themselves. You are no longer merely observing, you are now in the midst of a primitive operating environment, where the glint of unpolished metal and the rough feel of wooden handles speak volumes about the brutal reality of ancient bone repair. These were not the gleaming, sterile tools of modern surgery, but rather implements forged from necessity, designed for brute force, and wielded with a grim determination that often bordered on barbarity. The stories of those who survived, often with lifelong deformities, became cautionary tales, whispered around campfires and in village squares. They served as grim reminders of the fragility of life and the brutal consequences of injury. Yet, even in this harsh reality, there was a glimmer of human ingenuity, a persistent drive to alleviate suffering, however crude the methods. The earliest bone setters, for all their limitations, represented humanity's first tentative steps towards understanding and repairing the complex machinery of the body. You can almost hear the faint, echoing cries of pain, a somber soundtrack to the dawn of orthopedic surgery. The sharp pain in your leg seems to dull, replaced by the heavy weight of history. You might see a heavy, broad-bladed knife, perhaps made of iron or bronze, its edge dulled from repeated use and imperfect sharpening. This was a common historical fact, the primary tool for cutting away clothing, opening abscesses, or even preparing for amputation. Imagine the crude weight of it in your hand, the way it would tear rather than slice through flesh, leaving ragged, bleeding wounds. The very sight of it would send a shiver down your spine, knowing its purpose was to inflict pain, even if in the service of healing. It's like trying to carve a delicate sculpture with a butcher's cleaver. It gets the job done, but with a lot of collateral damage. You lie on the rough pallet, the initial shock of your broken leg slowly giving way to a dull, persistent ache that throbs with every beat of your heart. The elder, or perhaps a local healer, has done what he could, but the makeshift splint feels inadequate, and the pain is a constant, unwelcome companion. Now, as the sun begins to set and the shadows deepen, You are left to the mercy of time and the rudimentary methods of early immobilization. This is the world of primitive splints and bandages, where the goal was simply to hold the bone still, often with little regard for comfort or long-term consequences. Consider the various forms of saws that might have been employed. For larger bones, a simple wood saw, perhaps adapted from a carpenter's tool, might be used. For smaller bones, or for more precise though still horrifying cuts, a smaller, finer-toothed saw might be present. You can almost hear the grating sound of metal against bone, a high-pitched shriek that would echo in the confined space, a sound that would haunt the patient long after the ordeal was over. These saws, often uncleaned and unsterilized, were themselves vectors of disease, turning the act of severing a limb into a direct pathway for infection. This chilling detail of the sounds of early surgery is an obscure detail that truly brings the horror to life. You remember the strips of bark and reeds bound tightly around your leg? These were the most common historical facts for early splints, readily available materials that offered some degree of rigidity. Imagine the rough texture of the bark against your skin, perhaps chafing and irritating as the hours turn into days. The bindings, made from coarse linen or strips of animal hide, are pulled taut, creating pressure points that begin to ache almost as much as the broken bone itself. The intention is good to prevent movement that would exacerbate the injury, but the execution is often crude, leading to new forms of suffering. It's like trying to secure a delicate package with barbed wire. It'll stay put, but it won't be pretty. The insidious nature of these crude tools lay in their inherent danger. Their bluntness meant more force was required, leading to greater tissue damage, increased bleeding, and prolonged pain. Their lack of sterility meant that every cut introduced new pathogens into the body, turning a surgical intervention into a high-stakes gamble with infection. You might observe a surgeon, his hands stained with blood and grime, wiping his blade on his apron before making another incision, completely unaware of the invisible dangers he was spreading. It's a bit like trying to fix a delicate watch with a rusty wrench. You might turn the gears, but you'll also scratch the casing and introduce rust. Consider the various materials that might have been used for these early splints. Beyond bark and reeds, you might find evidence of hardened clay, shaped to fit the limb, or even woven baskets, carefully cut and adapted. In some cultures, animal bones themselves were sometimes used, fashioned into supports, a grim irony given the nature of your injury. The ingenuity was born of necessity, a desperate attempt to find anything that could provide stability in a world devoid of purpose-built medical equipment. This resourcefulness, while admirable, often came with its own set of problems, as the materials were rarely sterile or perfectly suited for the task. The academic debate surrounding the effectiveness of these early surgical tools is complex. While archaeological findings show evidence of successful trepanations drilling holes in the skull and amputations, historians still debate whether the survival rates were due to the tools themselves, or the sheer resilience of the human body and the limited nature of the interventions. Some argue that the very crudeness of the tools forced surgeons to be quick and decisive, minimizing the time the patient was exposed to pain and blood loss. Others contend that the tools themselves were a major source of trauma and infection, and that any successful outcomes were despite, rather than because of the instruments used. It's like arguing whether a blunt axe is better than no axe at all when you're trying to chop down a tree. It will eventually fall, but it will be a long, painful process. The insidious nature of improper immobilization was its potential to cause secondary injuries. A splint that was too tight could cut off circulation, leading to numbness, tingling, and eventually the death of tissue, a condition known as gangrene. You might notice your toes growing cold, a strange pallor spreading across your foot, and a pins and needles sensation that quickly turns into a deadening numbness. This silent, creeping death of your limb, often hidden beneath layers of bandages, was a terrifying possibility, turning a broken bone into a life-threatening emergency. It's a bit like trying to protect a delicate flower by crushing it in a vise. You might keep it from swaying, but you'll also destroy it. You might see a set of bone forceps, heavy and unrefined, designed for grasping and manipulating bone fragments, or perhaps for removing shattered pieces. Their powerful jaws would clamp down with immense force, crushing rather than cleanly gripping, causing further trauma to the surrounding tissues. The sight of these instruments, designed to crush and tear, would fill you with dread, knowing their purpose was to reshape the very framework of your body. This specific type of tool and its brutal application is a common historical fact that underscores the sheer force required in early bone surgery. It's like using a pair of pliers to fix a delicate piece of jewelry. It might work, but you'll probably damage it in the process. The academic debate surrounding the effectiveness of these early splints is complex. While archaeological evidence shows that many ancient fractures did indeed heal, historians still debate whether the success rates were due to the splints themselves, or simply the remarkable resilience of the human body and the fact that many fractures would heal on their own, albeit often with deformity, even without intervention. Some argue that rudimentary splints, by providing even minimal stability, significantly reduced pain and improved the chances of proper alignment. Others contend that the risks of infection, pressure sores, and nerve damage often outweighed the limited benefits, particularly for complex fractures. It's like arguing whether a leaky bucket is better than no bucket at all when you're trying to put out a fire. It might help a little, but it's far from ideal. Consider the various forms of mallets and chisels that might have been used, particularly for procedures involving the skull or for breaking apart fused bones. A heavy wooden mallet, perhaps paired with a sharp bone chisel, would be used to chip away at bone, or to create openings. You can almost feel the jarring impact, the dull thud of mallet against chisel, resonating through the patient's body. The precision was minimal, the risk of collateral damage immense. This use of blunt force for bone manipulation is an obscure detail that truly highlights the brutal nature of ancient orthopedic interventions. You might observe a fellow villager, their arm encased in a splint made from a hollowed-out log. An obscure detail that highlights the extreme measures taken when other materials were scarce. The sheer bulk and weight of such a splint would have been a constant burden, making movement almost impossible and sleep a torturous ordeal. Yet, in their desperation, people endured these cumbersome devices, clinging to any hope of recovery. The image of someone dragging such a heavy, unwieldy splint behind them is a stark reminder of the physical hardships of the era. The sheer lack of specialized instruments was another critical factor. Surgeons often had to make do with whatever tools were available, adapting everyday implements for medical purposes. A blacksmith's hammer might become a bone mallet, a kitchen knife, a scalpel, and a carpenter's saw an amputation tool. This improvisation, while a testament to human ingenuity, meant that the tools were rarely ideally suited for the delicate and precise work of surgery, leading to unnecessary pain and complications. Imagine a surgeon trying to perform a delicate procedure with tools designed for building a house. The results would be predictably messy. The lack of understanding of proper padding was another critical flaw. Without soft materials to cushion the limb, the rigid splint would press directly against the skin, causing painful sores and ulcers. You might feel a burning sensation developing under the splint, a localized pain that signals the beginning of skin breakdown. These sores, once formed, were incredibly difficult to heal in an unhygienic environment and often became entry points for infection, turning a simple pressure point into a life-threatening complication. It's like wearing shoes that are 2 sizes too small. They might fit, but they'll cause blisters and agony. The symptoms of a surgery performed with such crude tools were often immediate and severe. Massive blood loss, extensive tissue damage, shattered bone fragments, and overwhelming pain were common. The patient would be left with a gaping, ragged wound, highly susceptible to infection, and a body racked with trauma. The long-term consequences included chronic pain, nerve damage, and permanent disfigurement. It's a truly horrifying thought that the very instruments meant to heal could inflict such profound and lasting damage. The sheer duration of immobilization was also a challenge. Bones take weeks, sometimes months, to heal, and during this entire period, the splint would remain in place. Imagine the itching, the discomfort, the sheer boredom of being confined, unable to move your limb. The smell of unwashed skin and festering wounds would become a constant companion. The psychological toll of prolonged immobility, combined with the physical discomfort, was immense, testing the limits of human endurance. It's a truly humbling thought, the patience and resilience required to simply wait for nature to take its course. The eventual development of more refined and specialized surgical instruments, from the delicate scalpels of the Roman era to the precision tools of the Renaissance, marked a gradual but profound shift. As anatomical knowledge grew and surgical techniques became more sophisticated, so too did the tools, becoming sharper, more precise, and less traumatic. This evolution, driven by innovation and a growing understanding of the human body, slowly began to transform surgery from a brutal ordeal into a more controlled and effective medical practice. But the echoes of those early, crude instruments linger, a chilling reminder of the raw courage and sheer desperation that defined the earliest attempts to mend the broken body. You can almost feel the phantom weight of a heavy, unpolished blade, a somber testament to the brutal beginnings of surgical intervention. The sharp glint of metal seems to fade, replaced by the quiet hum of your fan as you drift deeper into the story. The symptoms of a poorly applied splint were often immediate and obvious. Increased pain, swelling, numbness, or a change in skin color were all red flags. Yet in a world without formal medical training, these signs were often missed or dismissed. You might try to communicate your discomfort to the elder, but without a shared understanding of anatomy or physiology, your complaints might be met with a shrug or reassurances that it will pass. The lack of effective communication between patient and healer was a significant barrier to proper care. It's like trying to explain complex physics to a toddler. You might be speaking, but they're not understanding. As the metallic glint of crude surgical tools fades from your mind, a new, more profound absence takes center stage, the terrifying void of anesthesia. You are no longer merely observing, you are now the patient, lying on a rough table, your broken bone a searing agony, and the surgeon's grim face illuminated by flickering lamplight. In this ancient world, the concept of rendering a patient unconscious or insensible to pain during surgery is utterly unknown. Every cut, every manipulation, every agonizing moment of bone repair is experienced in full, raw, unmitigated consciousness. This is the horrifying reality of conscious suffering, where the only pain relief is often a swift, brutal procedure and the sheer will to endure. The eventual development of more sophisticated splinting techniques, such as those used by the ancient Greeks and Romans, who employed bandages stiffened with wax or plaster, marked a slow but significant improvement. These methods, while still far from modern casts, offered better conformity to the limb and more effective immobilization. This gradual evolution, driven by observation and practical experience, slowly began to refine the art of bone setting, moving it from pure brute force to a more considered approach. But even with these advancements, the fundamental challenges of pain, infection, and long-term disability remained. You can almost feel the phantom pressure of rough bindings, a chilling reminder of the primitive attempts to fix what was broken. The dull ache in your leg seems to lessen, replaced by the quiet hum of your fan as you drift deeper into the story. You remember the elder's grim determination, and now you understand why. There are no gentle preparations, no soothing words to lull you into a peaceful slumber. Instead, you might be offered a strong draught of poppy juice, a common historical fact for pain relief, or a swig of crude alcohol. You swallow the bitter liquid, feeling a faint warmth spread through your stomach. A slight dulling of your senses, but the sharp, searing pain of your broken bone remains a dominant, screaming presence. The effects are fleeting, a mere whisper against the roar of agony that is about to engulf you. It's like trying to put out a bonfire with a teacup of water. It might make a tiny sizzle, but the fire rages on. You lie there, the crude splint a constant, uncomfortable presence, as the sun rises and sets, marking the slow, agonizing passage of time. The initial pain of the break has settled into a deep, throbbing ache, but now, a new dread begins to creep in the unsettling knowledge that the bone, still fractured, must be set. This is the brutal reality of reduction, the process of realigning shattered bone fragments. A common historical fact performed without the benefit of imaging, anesthesia, or even a full understanding of the complex mechanics of the human skeleton. It was a procedure born of necessity, executed with raw force, and endured with unimaginable courage. Imagine the sheer terror that grips you as the surgeon approaches, his tools glinting in the dim light. You can see every movement, hear every sound, and feel every sensation with horrifying clarity. Your body tenses, muscles coiling in anticipation of the inevitable. You try to scream, but your throat is dry, constricted by fear. You try to move, to pull away, but strong hands hold you down. unyielding. You are utterly vulnerable, a captive to the pain and the will of the surgeon. This complete lack of control, this absolute exposure to agony, is a common historical fact that defined surgery for millennia. You remember the elder's strong hands and the grim determination in his eyes. Now, perhaps a day or two after the initial injury, when some of the swelling might have subsided, he returns. He is accompanied by a few other strong individuals, their faces solemn, their presence a clear indication of the ordeal to come. There are no gentle preparations, no comforting words, just the stark, terrifying reality of what must be done. You are told to brace yourself, to hold still, but your muscles are already tensed, anticipating the inevitable agony. It's like preparing for a wrestling match where your opponent is a broken bone and the referee is a grim-faced healer. The process of reduction begins. The elder and his assistants grasp your limb, one above the break, one below, their grips firm and unyielding. You feel the tension building, the muscles in your legs screaming in protest, already spasming around the shattered fragments. Then, with a sudden, forceful pull, they begin to manipulate your limb. You hear the sickening grind of bone against bone, a sound that resonates deep within your skull, sending fresh waves of nausea through you. You scream, a raw, guttural sound, as the world explodes into a white-hot haze of torment. Your body arches, your hands clench, desperate for something to grasp, something to anchor you against the overwhelming pain. This is the moment where the healing truly begins, but it feels like a new, more profound injury. The goal is to bring the broken ends of the bone back into as close to their original alignment as possible. But without x-rays, the elder is working blind, relying solely on his sense of touch, his experience, and the visible deformity of your limb. He might rotate, twist, and pull, trying to feel the fragments click into place. Each adjustment sends fresh jolts of agony through you. Each movement a new test of your endurance. It's a bit like trying to thread a needle in a pitch-black room, with your hands tied behind your back, and the needle is made of razor blades. Consider the various methods used to manage pain, if they could even be called that. Beyond poppy juice and alcohol, some cultures employed forms of blunt force trauma to the head, hoping to induce unconsciousness, a truly desperate and dangerous measure. Others might use strangulation, or even extreme cold to numb the limb. But these methods were often ineffective and carried their own significant risks of further injury or death. You might feel a heavy blow to your head, a sudden dizzying darkness, only to awaken moments later to the renewed agony of the surgeon's knife. This grim ingenuity in attempting to dull pain, however futile, is an obscure detail that underscores the desperate human need for relief. Once the elder feels the bones are adequately aligned, or as aligned as they can be, the limb is quickly resecured in a fresh, perhaps slightly more robust splint. You feel the pressure of the bindings, the rough materials chafing your skin. But now there's a new kind of relief, a faint sense of stability that wasn't there before. The pain is still immense, a dull roar rather than a piercing shriek. But the immediate, sharp agony of the manipulation has subsided. You are left exhausted and trembling to recover from the brutal intervention. The academic debate surrounding the ethical implications of conscious surgery in ancient times is profound. While modern sensibilities recoil at the thought, historians still debate whether the benefits of life-saving interventions, however brutal, outweighed the immense suffering inflicted. Some argue that in an era where death from injury was common, any chance of survival, even at the cost of unimaginable pain, was a justifiable risk. Others contend that the sheer barbarity of conscious surgery raises fundamental questions about human dignity and the limits of what can be ethically inflicted, even in the name of healing. It's like arguing whether it's better to drown slowly or be thrown into a fire. Both are terrible, but one might offer a quicker end. The insidious nature of imperfect reduction was its potential for long-term disability. A bone that healed crookedly, or with fragments misaligned, could lead to chronic pain, limited mobility, and a permanent deformity. You might see individuals in your community with visibly shortened limbs, or arms that bend at an odd angle, the grim legacy of a poorly set fracture. These were the bad breaks, the ones that, even if they didn't kill you, left you with a lifelong reminder of your ordeal. Historians still debate whether the risks of attempting reduction, given the lack of pain control and sterility, sometimes outweighed the potential benefits, especially for fractures that might have healed adequately, albeit with some deformity on their own. It's a truly grim calculus, weighing immediate agony against potential future suffering. You might observe a patient, their face contorted in a silent scream, biting down on a leather strap or a piece of wood, a common historical fact, to prevent themselves from crying out or biting their tongue during the procedure. Their body would be writhing, muscles spasming as they fought against the overwhelming pain, their eyes wide with terror. The sheer physical exertion of enduring such agony, fully conscious, would leave them utterly exhausted, their spirit broken. This grim tableau of human endurance is a stark reminder of the raw courage required to face ancient surgery. Consider the various techniques that might have been employed for reduction. Beyond simple traction and manipulation, some ancient texts describe methods involving hanging the patient by the injured limb to use gravity for alignment, or even using weights to apply continuous traction. You might imagine yourself suspended, your body screaming in protest, as the relentless pull slowly, agonizingly, attempts to stretch your limb back into shape. This use of sustained traction, though rudimentary, is an obscure detail that demonstrates an early understanding of biomechanics, even if the methods were brutal. It's like trying to stretch a rubber band to its breaking point, hoping it will snap back into the right shape. The sheer duration of the pain was another critical factor. While surgeons would work as quickly as possible to minimize the patient's suffering, even a simple bone reduction could take minutes, and a complex amputation could last for what felt like an eternity. You would experience every second of it, every cut, every pull, every grind of bone, in excruciating detail. The relentless nature of the pain, with no respite, would push you to the very limits of human endurance, blurring the line between consciousness and madness. It's a truly terrifying thought, a living nightmare that stretched on without end. The academic debate surrounding the efficacy of ancient reduction techniques is fascinating. While archaeological evidence shows many healed fractures, some with remarkable alignment, historians still debate whether these successes were due to skilled practitioners or simply the body's natural healing capabilities overcoming the crude interventions. Some argue that experienced bone setters, through generations of empirical knowledge, developed a surprising degree of skill in manipulating fractures. Others contend that many successful reductions still resulted in significant functional impairment, and that the true measure of success was simply survival, rather than perfect anatomical restoration. It's like arguing whether a crude map is better than no map at all when you're lost in the wilderness. It might point you in a direction, but it's far from precise. The symptoms of conscious surgical trauma were immediate and overwhelming extreme pain, shock, massive blood loss, and profound psychological distress. The patient would often collapse into unconsciousness from the sheer agony, or simply die from shock. For those who survived, the long-term consequences included chronic pain, phantom limb sensations if an amputation was performed, and severe post-traumatic stress. It's a truly horrifying thought that the very act of healing could inflict such deep and lasting wounds, both physical and mental. You might observe a fellow villager, their leg visibly shorter than the other, the result of a severe fracture that healed with significant overlap, a common historical fact known as shortening. This permanent deformity would make walking difficult, often requiring the use of a crutch or a cane, and limiting their ability to perform manual labor. The physical burden was immense, but so too was the social stigma, as a visible disability often meant a diminished status in a community reliant on physical strength and capability. This common outcome, often glossed over in romanticized historical accounts, paints a grim picture of life with uncorrected injuries. The eventual advent of effective anesthesia in the mid-19th century, with the discovery and application of substances like ether and chloroform, marked the single most significant revolution in surgical history. For the first time, surgeons could operate on unconscious, pain-free patients, allowing for longer, more complex, and far more humane procedures. This breakthrough transformed surgery from a brutal spectacle into a more precise and compassionate science. But the echoes of those millennia of conscious suffering linger, a chilling reminder of the raw courage and sheer desperation that defined the earliest attempts to mend the broken body. You can almost hear the phantom screams of ancient patience, a somber symphony of suffering that underscores the long, arduous journey towards pain relief. The sharp pain in your body seems to fade, replaced by the quiet hum of your fan as you drift deeper into the story. Grateful for the sweet oblivion of modern medicine, the sheer courage required to endure such a procedure fully conscious is almost unimaginable to the modern mind. There was no escape from the pain, no gentle sedation, just the raw, unmitigated agony of bone being forced back into place. You would have to mentally steel yourself to find some inner reservoir of resilience to survive the ordeal. The memory of that searing pain, the sound of grinding bone, would be etched into your mind, a permanent scar deeper than any on your skin. It's a testament to the human spirit's capacity for endurance in the face of overwhelming suffering. As the phantom screams of conscious suffering begin to fade, a new, equally grim reality takes hold, the terrifying void of post-operative care. You have endured the brutal reduction, perhaps even the agonizing amputation, and against all odds, you have survived the initial ordeal. But in this ancient world, the battle is far from over. There are no sterile recovery rooms, no dedicated nurses, no understanding of hygiene or rehabilitation. You are left to the mercy of fate, often in unsanitary conditions, where the very environment meant to facilitate healing becomes a breeding ground for new dangers. This is the neglected nightmare of the aftermath, where survival was often a temporary reprieve before new complications arose. The lack of understanding of complications like nerve damage or blood vessel damage during reduction was another critical flaw. A forceful manipulation could easily sever a nerve, leading to permanent numbness or paralysis, or rupture a blood vessel, causing internal bleeding and swelling that could further compromise the limb. You might feel a sudden, sharp jolt, followed by a strange deadness in your foot, a terrifying realization that something has gone irrevocably wrong. These unseen injuries, often undetectable until it was too late, added another layer of risk to an already perilous procedure. It's like trying to fix a delicate clock with a sledgehammer. You might move the hands, but you'll also break the gears. You remember the rough pallet you lie on? Now perhaps stained with blood and bodily fluids? There are no clean sheets, no fresh bandages. The air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, stale food, and the faint, sickening odor of festering wounds. This lack of basic hygiene is a common historical fact that plagued early medical environments. Imagine trying to recover from a major injury in such conditions, where every breath you take, every touch, every movement, exposes you to countless unseen threats. It's like trying to recover from a shipwreck while still adrift in a stormy sea. The immediate danger might be over, but you're still in a perilous situation. Even after a successful reduction and immobilization, the patient was not out of the woods. The risk of infection remained paramount, especially if the skin had been broken. The internal trauma from the manipulation itself could create a breeding ground for bacteria, turning the site of healing into a festering wound. You might feel a fever developing, a throbbing heat radiating from your limb, and the sickening smell of pus beginning to permeate the air. This was the ultimate betrayal, to endure the agony of reduction, only to succumb to the silent, invisible enemy of infection. Imagine the constant discomfort. Your splint, if it remains, chafes and digs into your skin, creating pressure sores that quickly become open wounds. The bandages, if they were applied, are now soiled and stiff, clinging uncomfortably to your skin. You might feel a relentless itching, a burning sensation as your skin reacts to the constant irritation and lack of air. There is no one to regularly change your dressings, no one to clean your wounds, no one to offer even the simplest comfort. You're left to suffer in silence, your body slowly deteriorating in the absence of proper care. The slow, painstaking development of more humane and effective reduction techniques, from the use of traction tables in the Middle Ages to the eventual advent of anesthesia in the 19th century, marked a gradual but profound shift. These advancements slowly began to transform bone setting from a brutal ordeal into a more controlled and less agonizing medical procedure. But the echoes of those early, horrifying reductions linger, a chilling reminder of the raw courage and sheer desperation that defined the earliest attempts to fix broken bones. You can almost hear the phantom screams of ancient patience, a somber symphony of suffering that underscores the long, arduous journey of medical progress. The dull ache in your leg seems to fade, replaced by the quiet hum of your fan as you drift deeper into the story. The insidious nature of neglected post-operative care was its almost guaranteed progression towards infection. Even if the initial surgery was successful, the unhygienic environment, the lack of sterile dressings, and the absence of antibiotics meant that bacteria would inevitably colonize the wound. You might feel a fever returning, your stump if you underwent amputation becoming hot and swollen, and the familiar, sickening smell of pus beginning to emanate from the bandages. This was the grim reality. Surviving the surgery was only the first hurdle. The battle against secondary infection had just begun, and often, it was a losing one. It's like surviving a battle, only to succumb to a lingering illness in the aftermath. As the raw memory of bone reduction begins to recede, a new, more insidious threat emerges from the shadows of early medicine, the silent, invisible enemy of infection. You lie there, your broken leg now roughly set and splinted, but a creeping dread begins to settle over you. In this ancient world, the concept of microscopic pathogens is utterly unknown, and every cut, every wound, every invasive procedure is an open invitation for bacteria to invade, multiply, and turn the very act of healing into a slow, agonizing descent towards death. This is the horrifying reality of post-fix horrors, where the relief of a set bone was often quickly overshadowed by the relentless march of unseen invaders. Consider the lack of nutritional support. Your body, recovering from immense trauma, requires sustenance to heal. But in this ancient world, food might be scarce, and what is available might be unappetizing or difficult to consume. You might be given thin gruel or stale bread, barely enough to sustain you, let alone promote healing. The weakness and fatigue would be profound, hindering your body's ability to fight off infection and repair damaged tissues. This nutritional deficit, often overlooked, is an obscure detail that significantly impacted recovery rates. It's like trying to rebuild a house with no bricks or mortar. The foundation is there, but you can't complete the structure. You remember the elder's hands, strong and determined, but far from sterile. You recall the rough bark of the splint, the coarse linen bandages, none of which had been cleaned or disinfected in any meaningful way. If your bone had pierced the skin, a common historical fact for severe fractures, known as an open fracture, then the pathway for infection was direct and immediate. The soil, the air, the very tools used in the reduction, all teemed with unseen life, waiting for an opportunity to colonize your vulnerable flesh. It's like leaving a raw piece of meat out in the sun. You know what's going to happen, and it won't be pretty. The academic debate surrounding the impact of post-operative care on overall survival rates in ancient surgery is significant. While the dramatic nature of the surgery itself often captures attention, historians still debate whether the lack of effective post-operative care was the primary determinant of mortality, even more so than the surgical procedure itself. Some argue that even the most skillfully performed surgery was often rendered futile by the subsequent onslaught of infection and complications due to poor care. Others contend that while certainly a contributing factor, the inherent risks of the surgery and the patient's pre-existing health were equally, yet if not more, important. It's like arguing whether a car crash or the subsequent lack of medical attention is more responsible for a fatality. Both play a crucial role. Imagine the subtle changes that begin to manifest in the days following the setting of your bone. A throbbing warmth develops around the injury, a heat that spreads beyond the immediate site of the break. You might notice a faint redness creeping across your skin, a telltale blush that deepens with each passing hour. Then comes the swelling, not the immediate swelling of the injury, but a new angry puffiness that feels hot to the touch. This is the insidious march of inflammation, your body's desperate attempt to fight off the invaders, but in this era, it's often a losing battle. You might observe a fellow patient, their body riddled with bed sores, a common historical fact for those confined to a bed for prolonged periods without proper turning or padding. These open wounds, often deep and festering, were excruciatingly painful and served as direct entry points for infection, leading to further complications and a slow, agonizing death. The sight of such suffering, a preventable consequence of neglect, is a truly heartbreaking reminder of the harsh realities of ancient convalescence. The insidious nature of conscious surgery was its psychological trauma, which often lingered long after the physical wounds had healed. The memory of the pain, the sounds, the smells, would be seared into the patient's mind, leading to nightmares, anxiety, and a profound fear of any future medical intervention. You might survive the surgery, but your mind would be forever scarred by the ordeal. A constant replay of the moments of unbearable agony. It's a bit like trying to forget a nightmare when you're still living in it. The images and sensations are too vivid to escape. The sheer psychological toll of prolonged recovery in such conditions was immense. The boredom, the isolation, the constant pain, and the ever-present fear of death would wear down even the strongest spirit. You might lie there for weeks, your mind wandering, your thoughts consumed by your suffering, as the world outside continues without you. The lack of mental stimulation, the absence of comforting human interaction, would contribute to a profound sense of despair. It's a truly humbling thought, the resilience required just to maintain sanity in such a grim recovery environment. The insidious nature of infection was its ability to mimic other ailments, making diagnosis difficult. A fever might be attributed to the shock of the injury, the increasing pain to the bone, knitting together, and the general malaise to your body, recovering. These misinterpretations meant that the infection was often allowed to fester, unchecked, until it had gained an irreversible foothold. You might try to explain your worsening condition to your family or the healer, but without a shared understanding of disease, your complaints might be met with stoicism or reassurances that it's just part of the process. It's a bit like trying to find a ghost in a dark house. You know something is there, but you can't quite put your finger on it. The symptoms of neglected post-operative care were progressive and debilitating. Beyond infection and bed sores, patients would suffer from muscle atrophy, joint stiffness, and a general wasting away of their bodies. Their limbs, once strong, would become weak and emaciated, their joints frozen in place. The long-term consequences included permanent disability, chronic pain, and a significantly shortened lifespan. It's a slow, agonizing decline, a life gradually consumed by the relentless march of preventable complications. Consider the various forms infection could take. A localized infection might develop into a painful abscess, a pocket of pus that would swell and throb, eventually bursting through the skin, releasing a foul-smelling discharge. This was a common historical fact, often seen as a good sign by healers, who believed it was the body expelling bad humors. You might endure the excruciating pain of such a boil, the constant pressure building until it finally ruptures, offering a brief, sickening relief. But the open wound, now larger and more exposed, became an even greater portal for further infection, turning a localized problem into a systemic crisis. It's a truly grim cycle, where the cure for one problem often led to another. The eventual understanding of the critical importance of post-operative care, particularly hygiene and wound management, marked another crucial turning point in medical history. The work of figures like Florence Nightingale in the 19th century, who revolutionized nursing and hospital sanitation, transformed recovery environments from death traps into places of genuine healing. This shift, driven by a growing awareness of infection control and patient well-being, slowly began to make surgery a safer and more successful endeavor. But the echoes of those early neglected nightmares linger, a chilling reminder of the countless lives lost not just to the injury itself, but to the brutal realities of its aftermath. You can almost feel the phantom chill of a damp, unhygienic bed, a somber testament to the long, arduous journey towards compassionate care. The quiet hum of your fan seems to deepen as you drift deeper into the story. Grateful for the unseen comforts of modern recovery, the academic debate surrounding the impact of infection on early surgical outcomes is profound. While ancient texts describe various attempts to clean wounds, historians still debate whether these efforts had any significant impact on reducing infection rates. Given the complete lack of understanding of microbiology, some argue that certain herbal poultices or applications of wine might have had mild antiseptic properties, offering a slim chance of preventing infection. Others contend that the vast majority of infections were inevitable, and that survival was often a matter of sheer luck and a robust immune system, rather than any effective medical intervention. It's like arguing whether a single drop of water in a desert will make a difference. It might, but the odds are not in your favor. As the chilling echoes of neglected post-operative care begin to recede, a new, more hopeful, yet still arduous, path emerges from the long, dark history of bone repair, the slow march to modern orthopedics. You are now witnessing the dawn of a new era, a period marked by incremental, painstaking advancements that would gradually transform the brutal, high-stakes gamble of ancient bone setting into the precise, life-saving science we know today. This was not a sudden revolution, but a slow, determined evolution, driven by scientific inquiry, dedicated individuals, and a growing understanding of the human body. You might observe a fellow patient, their limb becoming increasingly swollen and discolored, the skin turning a mottled green or black, accompanied by a sickening sweet odor, the unmistakable signs of gangrene. An obscure detail that was a common and terrifying consequence of severe infection or compromised circulation. The flesh would begin to die, becoming cold and numb, and the only recourse, if the patient was to survive, was often amputation. The sight of such a limb slowly rotting on the body was a grim reminder of infection's relentless power, a visual horror that would haunt the living. You might observe a shift in the medical landscape, a common historical fact being the rise of formalized medical education and specialized surgical training. No longer are bone setters merely village elders or traveling charlatans. Increasingly, they are trained physicians. With a deeper understanding of anatomy and physiology, hospitals, once places of last resort and often death, are slowly becoming institutions dedicated to healing. With a nascent focus on cleanliness and patient comfort, it's like watching a muddy, winding path slowly transform into a paved road. Still rough in places, but undeniably a step forward. The sheer volume of pus and discharge that could emanate from an infected wound was immense. Bandages, if they were used, would quickly become soaked and foul-smelling, attracting flies and further exacerbating the unhygienic conditions. The constant oozing, the persistent odor, and the sheer discomfort would be a constant companion, a grim soundtrack to your slow decline. Imagine trying to sleep with such a wound, the pain throbbing, the smell nauseating, the flies buzzing around your festering limb. It's a thought that makes your stomach churn, the sheer unsanitary reality of early medical care. Imagine a surgeon, perhaps in the late 18th or early 19th century, meticulously studying anatomical drawings, a common historical fact that reflects the growing importance of detailed anatomical knowledge. He might be experimenting with new splinting materials, perhaps plaster of Paris, which offered a more rigid and conforming cast than previous methods. He is driven by a desire to reduce pain, prevent infection, and improve outcomes. A stark contrast to the sheer desperation that defined earlier interventions. This intellectual curiosity, this relentless pursuit of better methods, was the engine of progress. The symptoms of systemic infection, or sepsis, were terrifying. What might start as a localized fever could escalate to shaking chills, rapid heart rate, confusion, and eventually, organ failure. Your body, overwhelmed by the bacterial invasion, would begin to shut down, its vital functions failing one by one. The delirium would set in, your mind clouded by fever, your thoughts fragmented and incoherent. This was the ultimate betrayal, to survive the initial trauma and the brutal reduction, only to succumb to an invisible enemy that consumed you from within. It's a truly agonizing way to die, a slow, burning descent into oblivion. The insidious nature of this slow march was the resistance to change, the entrenched traditions, and the sheer difficulty of disseminating new knowledge across vast distances. Many doctors trained in older methods were skeptical of new ideas, and the lack of communication infrastructure meant that breakthroughs in one region might take decades to reach another. You might hear whispers of a new technique, a new material, but it would be years, perhaps generations, before it became widely adopted. It's a bit like trying to push a boulder uphill with a spoon. It moves, but very, very slowly. The eventual understanding of germ theory in the 19th century, pioneered by figures like Louis Pasteur and Joseph Lister, marked the single most significant turning point in the battle against infection. The realization that invisible microorganisms caused disease revolutionized surgical practice, leading to the widespread adoption of antiseptics and sterile techniques. This scientific breakthrough, though centuries too late for those in our story, transformed medicine from a perilous gamble into a more predictable and often successful endeavor. but the echoes of those early, horrifying infections linger. A chilling reminder of the countless lives lost to an enemy that remained unseen for millennia. The throbbing heat in your legs seems to subside, replaced by the cool hum of your fan as you drift deeper into the story. Grateful for the invisible shield of modern medicine, consider the early attempts at internal fixation, an obscure detail that emerged in the mid-19th century, long before modern surgical screws and plates. Surgeons might experiment with wires, pins, or even ivory pegs to hold shattered bone fragments together. These early attempts were often fraught with complications, including infection and rejection by the body. But they represented a revolutionary shift in thinking, the idea of directly stabilizing the bone from within. You can almost feel the delicate tension as a surgeon attempts to insert a metal pin into a fractured bone, knowing that a single misstep could lead to disaster. It's like trying to build a tiny, intricate bridge inside a collapsing tunnel. Incredibly difficult, and with high stakes, as the phantom throbbing of infection begins to fade. A new, more chilling reality takes hold, the grim necessity of amputation. You lie there, your broken leg now a source of constant pain and, worse, a festering wound that shows no signs of healing. The fever rages, your body racked with chills, and the putrid smell of gangrene fills the air. In this ancient world, where infection was a death sentence and complex internal repairs were impossible, the only hope for survival, a common historical fact, was often to sever the dying limb. This was the ultimate desperate resort, a brutal bargain with death, trading a part of yourself for a chance at life. The academic debate surrounding the relative importance of individual breakthroughs versus broader societal changes in the advancement of orthopedics is ongoing. Historians still debate whether the development of anesthesia, antiseptics, or X-rays was the single most pivotal moment, or if it was the cumulative effect of countless smaller innovations and a general shift in scientific thinking. Some argue that without the ability to control pain, complex surgeries would have remained impossible, regardless of other advancements. Others contend that the understanding of germ theory was the true game changer, as it finally allowed for safe, invasive procedures. It's like arguing which ingredient is most important in a complex recipe. All are necessary for the final dish. You remember the elder, his face grim, his eyes holding a profound sadness. He approaches your palate, not with the tools for setting a bone, but with a different set of instruments, a crude, heavy knife, perhaps a saw, and a heated iron. There are no gentle words, no false promises, just the stark truth your leg is dying, and to save you, it must be removed. The terror that grips you is visceral, a primal fear of dismemberment. You try to protest, to beg, but your voice is weak and your body is too exhausted to resist. It's like being told you must sacrifice a part of your soul to save your life, a choice no one should ever have to make. You might observe the first rudimentary use of X-rays, a common historical fact, discovered by Wilhelm Röntgen in 1895, allowing doctors to finally see inside the body without incision. Imagine the awe and wonder as a physician examines a photographic plate, revealing the intricate network of a broken bone, its fragments clearly visible for the first time. This revolutionary diagnostic tool transformed bone repair from guesswork into a precise science, allowing surgeons to accurately assess fractures, plan their interventions, and verify the success of their reductions. It's like suddenly being given a map after years of navigating blind. The path ahead becomes clear. Imagine the agonizing preparation. There's no anesthesia, only perhaps a strong draught of poppy juice or a swig of crude alcohol, which might dull the edges of your consciousness, but will do little to truly numb the pain. You are held down by strong hands, your body trembling, as the elder prepares. You feel the cold, sharp edge of the knife against your skin. Then the searing pain as it cuts through flesh and muscle. The sound of tearing tissue, the gush of warm blood, fills your ears. You scream, a sound that tears from the depths of your being, a primal cry of agony that echoes in the confined space. This is not surgery as you know it. This is a controlled act of butchery, a desperate race against time and infection. The sheer dedication of pioneering orthopedic surgeons was remarkable. They spent countless hours in anatomical dissection, meticulously studying the human skeleton, and experimenting with new techniques and materials. They faced skepticism, resistance, and often heartbreaking failures. But their relentless pursuit of knowledge and their commitment to alleviating suffering drove them forward. Imagine these tireless individuals, their hands calloused from years of practice, their minds constantly seeking better ways to mend the broken body. It's a thought that inspires profound respect, the human drive to overcome limitations and push the boundaries of what is possible. The process of amputation is swift and brutal. The elder works quickly, his movements precise, driven by years of grim experience. He cuts through the soft tissues, exposing the bone. Then comes the saw, its teeth gnawing through the hard, resistant bone. A sound that grates on your very soul. You feel the vibrations, the tearing, the grinding, each stroke sending fresh waves of white-hot pain through your body. The smell of burning flesh, as the heated iron is applied to cauterize the stump and stop the bleeding, fills your nostrils, a sickening aroma that will forever be seared into your memory. It's like having your limb torn off by a wild animal, but with a horrifying, calculated precision. The symptoms of this slow march towards modern orthopedics were a gradual but undeniable improvement in patient outcomes. Fewer deaths from infection, less chronic pain, and a greater chance of regaining full function after a broken bone. The deformities that once plagued survivors became less common, and the quality of life for those who suffered injuries improved dramatically. It was a testament to the power of scientific inquiry and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. It's a truly heartwarming thought, seeing the suffering lessen, the hope grow, and the future brighten. Once the limb is severed, the immediate aftermath is a mixture of shock and a strange, dizzying relief. The agonizing pain of the amputation itself begins to subside, replaced by a dull, throbbing ache in your stump. You are left with a raw, bleeding wound, often crudely bandaged, and the terrifying knowledge that you are now forever changed. The limb, once a part of you, now lies discarded. A stark reminder of the price you paid for survival. This immediate visceral impact of dismemberment is an obscure detail that truly highlights the trauma of ancient surgery. The legacy of this slow march is the sophisticated orthopedic surgery we have today, a field that can reconstruct shattered limbs, replace worn-out joints, and restore mobility to those who once faced a lifetime of disability. We stand on the shoulders of those early, brave, and often brutal bone setters, their struggles and their limited successes paving the way for the miracles of modern medicine. The echoes of their pain and desperation have faded, replaced by the quiet hum of advanced medical technology, a testament to humanity's enduring quest to mend what is broken. And now, as our tale of the brutal methods of healing broken bones draws to a close, let the images of primitive knives, screams of pain, and battles against infection fade into the background. Picture yourself lying in your soft bed, the warmth of your blankets enveloping you, and the worries of the modern world drifting away. Let your mind wander to calm rivers, lavender fields under the moon, or any other peaceful scene you can imagine. Take a deep breath, feel the cool air fill your lungs, and exhale any lingering tension. Remember, while history may be full of mistakes and scary choices, we have learned a lot. We have progressed, we have learned, and we have found better ways to care for ourselves. So rest easy. It is okay. Let these stories gently lull you into a deep sleep. Let your mind rest, your body relax, and your soul find peace. Fall asleep knowing you are safe and protected. The insidious nature of post-amputation complications was its almost inevitable progression towards infection. The open wound, despite the crude cauterization, was a gaping portal for bacteria. Without sterile techniques, antibiotics, or even a basic understanding of wound care, infection was a near certainty. You might feel a fever returning, the stump becoming hot and swollen, and the familiar, sickening smell of pus beginning to emanate from the bandages. This was the grim reality. Surviving the amputation was only the first hurdle. The battle against infection had just begun. And often, it was a losing one. It's like escaping a burning building, only to find yourself trapped in a room full of poisonous gas.